All right, so get ready to dive into this world of cheese-powered heroism, unexpected villains, and enough cheesy goodness to make you lactose intolerant. From laughter, that is. Today, we're exploring the Cheeseman saga. You know, that gloriously bizarre superhero story?
Yeah.
Told through a series of, shall we say, unique PDF documents.
It's not your average comic book adventure, that's for sure. But that's part of what makes it so fascinating.
Exactly. We're dealing with Cian Whelan, a young hacker from Clonmel, Ireland. And yes, the setting is key to the humor here, who gets his powers from the most unlikely of sources. Cheese.
Of course.
And we're not talking about subtle Swiss watch-like precision here.
Right.
Think cheese webs.
Oh, yeah?
Cheese blasts. The guy can even talk about cheese for hours. Have you ever encountered a hero quite like this?
It's a brilliant subversion of the superhero origin story. But what I find particularly interesting is the local hero aspect.
Okay.
Cheeseman's powers aren't just some random cosmic event. They're deeply tied to his hometown, to Clonmel itself.
It's like his powers are as specific and, dare I say, pungent as the town itself.
Precisely. It adds this layer of absurdity, but it also makes you wonder about the nature of power. What does it mean for a hero to be so intrinsically connected to a place?
And is he really a force for good when he's leaving a trail of cheesy chaos in his wake? I mean, take his origin story. Picture this. Young Season, obsessed with cheese, even before it becomes his claim to fame, stumbles upon some glowing cheese made by his school deli man, no less.
Wow.
Of course he eats it.
Oh, no.
Bad move, right?
Well, it's a classic case of with great cheese comes great responsibility or something like that.
Right.
But instead of radioactive spiders or gamma rays,
Yeah.
we have glowing cheddar.
It's ridiculous and brilliant.
Absolutely. And the transformation scene, don't even get me started. He's suddenly shooting cheese from his fingertips, can't stand the sight of fag water. And the phrase, say S-U-C-C cheese, let's just say it becomes his catchphrase.
It's playing with those classic superhero tropes, the reluctant hero, the accidental powers, the public menace, despite good intentions. But it does so with a wink and a nod and a whole lot of melted cheese.
And speaking of classic tropes, let's talk about the villain. Well, one of them anyway. Enter the businessman.
Yeah.
Cian's landlord, rival for the most coveted house in Clonmel, and you guessed it, he despises cheese. We're talking about a real estate tycoon.
Who's obsessed with order, terrified of anything messy, and has some of the best lines in the entire saga. The unmitigated gall.
You've got to admire his commitment to indignation.
Absolutely. But what's interesting is what lies beneath the surface of this cheese-hating antagonist. You've got Cian, the young, tech-savvy hero, facing off against this embodiment of old money and established power.
Right.
Did that dynamic resonate with you at all?
It's a classic clash, but it's particularly relevant today, would you say?
Yeah.
You have this generational tension, a struggle between those who benefit from existing structures and those who are trying to find their place in a rapidly changing world. And the fact that it plays out against a backdrop of cheese-related mayhem just adds to the absurdity of it all.
And let's not forget about that crucial element of any good superhero story. The best friend turned arch nemesis. In Cheeseman's world, that would be Philip, who starts out as your typical nerdo-running anime-loving dude.
Right.
Until he's impaled by, wait for it, a flamin' hot Dorito.
You can't make this stuff up, folks.
It's the kind of detail that makes you laugh out loud and then immediately need to tell someone about it. But what about the whole edgelord arc?
Yeah.
What did you make of that?
I think it's brilliant on multiple levels. On the surface, you've got this hilarious visual, a guy in a trench coat and flame-swimming trunks, wielding a katana and spouting existential angst. Pure comedy gold.
For sure, but then there's that deeper layer, right?
Right. It's about identity. Right. The struggle between good and evil that exists within all of us. Plus, you have to appreciate the absurdity of taking internet subcultures like the whole edgelord thing and turning them into literal supervillains.
And then there's Ryan, who initially seems like she might be a typical damsel in distress.
Sure.
But she evolves into something far more complex. Did you find that to be the case?
Absolutely. She's not just a passive character. Ryan makes choices even if they're often reckless, and she ends up subverting those traditional power dynamics we often see in these kinds of narratives.
Their relationship goes through so many twists and turns. It's a roller coaster for sure. But things take a darker turn, don't they? I mean, when Cheeseman accidentally nukes Clonmel in a cheese-fueled rage, that's a game changer.
Talk about cheesy meltdown. It's a turning point in the story. Suddenly the stakes are much higher.
And the barman, poor guy. turns to alcoholism, which, let's be honest, is a pretty understandable reaction to having your town cheese nuked.
Right.
And Cian, of course, is left grappling with the consequences of his actions. What did you make of that whole sequence?
I think it's where the story really starts to grapple with those bigger, more complex themes. The nature of power, the responsibility that comes with it, the blurred lines between hero and villain. It's surprisingly poignant, especially for a story about a cheese-powered superhero.
It is. But true to form, it never loses its sense of humor. So we find ourselves in this dystopian future ruled by none other than Maddie McGrath, who naturally has banned all superheroes.
Oh, wow.
Cian, consumed by guilt, is on the run, hiding out with the barman and a new character. Leo Bond, who I have to say quickly became a fan favorite. The guy hates work and has this almost supernatural ability to sniff out cheese. What's not to love?
He's a scene stealer, that's for sure. But I think his presence also speaks to the story's ability to constantly surprise you. Just when you think you've seen it all, you get a talking cheese wheel named Ryan showing up on the doorstep speaking only Spanish.
It's moments like that where you have to admire the sheer audacity of this story.
Absolutely. It could have gone completely off the rails, but it somehow manages to maintain this perfect balance of absurdity and genuine heart.
100%. So we have this talking cheese wheel who, as it turns out, is Cian's son. What did you think about that twist? I mean, I knew things were going to get weird, but that one really threw me for a loop.
Right. And it's not just played for laughs. There's this whole mythical element to it. Ryan is presented as this chosen one destined to return to kill meat in this cheese-filled promised land. But Cian, who's now lactose intolerant, because of course he is, wants nothing to do with any of it.
It's almost Shakespearean, isn't it? The sins of the father, or in this case, the cheese of the father being visited upon the son. But while Cian is dealing with this newfound fatherhood, we're also introduced to the Gavazon Corporation run by the truly sinister Gavin Lonergan.
Right.
They created Ryan as a weapon, but surprise, surprise, he had other plans.
Gavazon represents so much of what the story is critiquing. Corporate greed, unchecked ambition, technological overreach. They're the perfect foil to Cheeseman's chaotic cheese-fueled heroism. Plus, they've got their own weapon, CZ-420, a Cheeseman clone waiting in the wings. I'm curious, what did you think about CZ-420 when you first encountered that plot point?
I was completely floored. It's such a classic sci-fi trope, but the way it's deployed in the Cheeseman saga, just brilliant. But I have to ask, what about Mac Gavazon's cyborg henchman with the shovel arm?
Don't even get me started on Mac and his shovel arm. It's details like that that make this story so much fun to dissect. They're completely absurd, but they also serve a purpose.
Right. They highlight the absurdity of the entire situation of this world that's gone completely mad. It's a brilliant commentary, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And it's done with such a light touch. You're laughing, but you're also thinking, wait a minute, is this really that far off from our own reality?
It's satire at its finest. So we've got Cian the barman and a giant Spanish-speaking cheese wheel on the run from Gavazon and their cyborg henchmen trying to outrun their past and maybe save the future. What did you think about that chase sequence? I mean, it's a wild ride, to say the least.
It's pure escapist fun, but it's also so cleverly constructed. You have these moments of over-the-top action interspersed with these really poignant reflections on friendship loss and the state of the world.
And the setting.
Yeah.
Post-apocalyptic Ireland, where the environment is ravaged, technology has run amok, and even the pubs are serving mozzarella on tap.
Oh, wow.
It's bleak, hilarious, and strangely relatable all at the same time.
It's like looking into a funhouse mirror reflection of our own world, where everything is slightly distorted but still recognizable.
Exactly. And then they find themselves hiding out in the ruins of the Clonmel Museum, of all places, right in front of this exhibit, celebrating Cheeseman's past victories.
Wow.
I thought that was such a brilliant touch. What about you?
It's heartbreaking and hilarious at the same time. Cheeseman is confronted with his past, with all the choices he's made, the good and the bad. And just when he starts to reconnect with the Barman and Ryan, tragedy strikes. What a gut punch that was.
Right. Out of nowhere, the CZ-420 clone, disguised as Cheeseman, murders the barman in cold blood.
Right.
It's so brutal, so unexpected. How did you react to that scene? I have to admit, I didn't see it coming at all.
It's a reminder that even in this absurd, cheese-filled world, there are real consequences, real loss.
Yeah.
And it completely changes the stakes for Cian. He's no longer just fighting to save himself or even the future. He's fighting for his son's life.
It's a powerful moment for his character. He makes a choice, a true hero's sacrifice, and tells Ryan to flee to kill Meaden to embrace his cheesy destiny.
Right.
Knowing he can't follow that his lactose intolerance is basically a death sentence, He stays behind to face his fate.
It's a classic hero sacrifice, but with a distinctly cheesy twist. And I think that's what makes it so effective.
Yeah.
You're emotionally invested in these characters, even though they're surrounded by all this absurdity.
You're right. And speaking of absurdity, we can't forget about Leoban. After a delightful detour to the last remaining movie theater, turns out the guy really loved Adam Sandler. He ends up sacrificing himself to help Sihan and Ryan escape. What a send-off.
Leoben's death is so perfectly in line with his character. He goes out on his own terms, surrounded by bad movies and ice cream.
Yeah.
It's hilarious, it's tragic, and it's a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there's still room for friendship, for laughter, for a little bit of joy.
So picture this, the ruins of the Clonmel Museum, right? Seen armed with his cheese blasts and a whole lot of guilt, facing off against his younger, superpowered self.
Oh, wow.
Talk about an existential crisis. It's a brutal fight, a real clash of cheesy titans, and honestly, it doesn't look good for our lactose-intolerant hero.
Right.
What went through your mind when you got to this part of the story?
It's a brilliant metaphor for the choices we make, the paths we take.
Yeah.
Cian is literally battling against a version of himself, his younger, more powerful, but ultimately more ruthless self.
It makes you think about how much we change over time, doesn't it? And what aspects of ourselves we might end up fighting against, both literally and figuratively.
Precisely. And just when it seems like all hope is lost for Cian, he hears the voices of his past. The businessman,
Wow.
edgelord, even Ryan.
Oh, wow.
They're like these ghostly echoes urging him to fight to embrace his cheesy destiny. What an incredibly powerful moment. Did you find it as moving as I did?
It gave me chills. You have these characters who were once antagonists, obstacles in Cian's journey, becoming sources of strength in his final moments.
Right?
They're a reminder of the impact he's had on those around him, for better or for worse. They represent the messy, complicated tapestry of his life.
It's almost Shakespearean in its tragedy, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And then just when you're not sure what's going to happen next, Cian unleashes this massive wave of cheese energy, obliterating the clone. It's epic. It's heroic. It's very cheesy. But it comes at a cost, doesn't it?
It's a Pyrrhic victory, of course.
Yeah.
Cian saves Ryan, but in doing so, he's mortally wounded.
And it's in that moment of sacrifice, of ultimate vulnerability, that he seems to find peace. It's both heartbreaking and strangely beautiful.
It is. And it's made even more poignant by his final moments with Ryan. The passing of his vape, his trusty sidekick throughout the saga, takes on this almost mythical quality.
Like he's handing Excalibur down to the next generation. It's a symbol of their bond, a reminder that even in death there's continuity, a legacy that lives on.
And the way he shares one last desperate puff with Ryan, it's heartbreaking, it's hilarious, and then splat, dead again.
Yeah.
Only the creators of Cheeseman could pull off an ending like that. What did you think about the ambiguity of that final moment? Did you want him to come back, or do you think it was a fitting end for our cheesy hero?
I'm still not sure. But that's the beauty of this story, isn't it? It stays with you. It makes you think, it makes you laugh, and it makes you wonder what it all means. This bizarre, cheese-filled epic. It's a wild ride from start to finish.
And that's what makes it such a compelling subject for our deep dive. Cheeseman isn't just a silly story about a cheese-powered superhero. It's a reflection on identity, responsibility, and the absurdity of it all. It's about finding humor and hope in the most unexpected places, even if those places happen to be covered in melted cheese.
Couldn't have said it better myself. So to our listener, we leave you with this. Track down those Cheeseman PDFs if you dare. You'll never look at a block of cheddar the same way again. And who knows, maybe you'll even discover a new appreciation for the power of cheese.